Welcome to Windows on the World. I didn't have my mic on then, but it's on now. And what a great show we've got for you tonight. First of all, I'm going to give you a little summation of what we've been putting out and the reason I put this out the way I do. The world really does not need any more cults or cult leaders, as in those that usurp a narrative and proclaim themselves to be a fountain of unknown knowledge. I think we've all seen those appear and disappear, and even more seem to appear. This is the nature of the internet. This has been a real distraction, and it remains to be so. These types, though, are easy to spot, but they still hoodwink the gullible and those who are not paying proper attention. And how many people out there are paying proper attention? There's not that many. Not our listeners, of course, because they do pay attention, because the information in these shows needs to be listened to. Otherwise, you can't just flip through it. You have to actually go into the depth of what we're talking about. And most of it's really simple. It is with this in mind that I present simple, direct information. The sources are given and we do continue to join the dots. And with this approach, we actually have the bigger picture, and we have since we've started. This is through the results of actions and the cover story versus the intended goals. It has to be simple. We look at outcomes and drivers of the changes that are leading to those outcomes. And it's with this in mind. Well, let's put it this way. Isn't it unbelievable that the public still fall for the two sides of a given argument, never realising that the argument and the two sides are already unified at the highest level to bring in the desired outcomes, which are never even talked about? Well, this show, I've actually called it the end of the Serpent Race, which I think is a positive and optimistic outcome, because indeed we will see the end of this particular phase, which is being imposed at the moment all over the planet. Well, the Serpent Race hate God and mankind. Communism is their religion. They actually originate from Europe, Asia and Africa. And we're going to be talking about that tonight. We've actually covered this in shows such as Pawns in the Game and the follow-ups to that, because I went into this serpent cult and why it's so important for a particular group. And the serpent system is the practical application of the Luciferian doctrine. And that is something which we are going to be talking about through several sources this evening. It is a cult, which means hidden, and it's spread throughout the Orient and Europe and Africa. According to the author of Mystery of the Serpent, well, the author is known as B.F. Jackson, the serpent capital was Lhasa, Tibet, and had representatives as a cover in Moscow, London, New York, and a new base in Tel Aviv from the 1950s in the modern-day state of Israel. Its tools are anarchistic Bolshevism, Fabianism, socialistic communism. And we are going to be talking about two separate publications. The first one, Mystery of the Serpent by B.F. Jackson, which we will actually refer to quite a lot during this show, and a secondary pamphlet which we'll get onto soon. Both of these are quite old, and this is an important point, I think, with this machine learning technology and AI. All of this stuff from the past is going to be out of the picture, but it's there for you to find. That's the trick. They can't make everything disappear. If Google Books want to control everything, then you will be able to find a lot of publications on there, and it's still useful for that. But it's a good time to start downloading books, and even if they're PDFs, they are useful. I have a huge archive of these, and they are great for cross-referencing. So we have to remember that we can't be relying on the internet of the future to actually have this stuff. It's already started disappearing, and most of it you have to search for by name. Okay, so let's get back to this. It has been predicted that false Christs shall show great signs and wonders, says this publication. The author states, at the time of writing, which was before the early 1950s, because it refers to the early 1950s, it hasn't actually got a date on it. According to this author, the representative of the New Age, the New Order, was Abdul Baraba Baha of Johns Hopkins University, Baltimore, Maryland. Now, when I looked into this character, he came up several times, so it's not just the wishful thinking of one author. There's actually a lot of proof behind it, and we are talking about basically the infiltration, the false messiahs that are presented to us. Of course, there will never be one. There seems to be multiple of these at the present time all over the world, but at one point in time, Abdul Baraba Baha of Johns Hopkins University, Baltimore, Maryland, was described as one of these antichrists. One source states Abdul Baraba Baha believes he was traceable to Abraham through Ishmael and from the 33rd generation of Muhammad himself, Baha being born in Mecca. He was said to have predicted all world events in his time, that's in his lifetime. The latest at the time of publication of a pamphlet I discovered was that Japan would attack America. He actually predicted this before it happened. Well, as this was brought about with a contrived event, it's fair to assume that Baha was an agent of the world revolutionary movement and had inside knowledge. He was a messianic figure to both Muslims and Jews, or those who professed to be of these faiths. As we have introduced our first author, we now visit this second publication I referred to. It's called Truth and Light, Volume 31, published in Minneapolis, January the 30th, 1943. Is this mysterious prince Antichrist? It says we reprint this article from the June issue at the request of many of our readers. A long time ago, John the Apostle said that many antichrists had entered into the world. In these late days, the names of a number of men have been put forward as candidates for the title of the Antichrist. The stock of most of these is now running low. They at last appear to a few Americans, and a name that points to a personality differing widely from those that have been pressed upon our attention is from Dr. James Hollenbeck. Now, this is very interesting because Dr. James Hollenbeck, who actually describes Baha as this Antichrist figure, he's the second person that does that. Obviously, the first one's B.F. Jackson. It says he differs so radically from many who have sponsored sensational interpretations of the scriptures that he is entitled to a place entirely of his own. So, Dr. James Hollenbeck, Presbyterian missionary to India, archaeologist, paleontologist, and decipherer of Egyptian hieroglyphics. It was while he was in Egypt as a language expert in connection with the opening of the tomb of Tutankhamun that he met King Faisal of Iraq. Dr. Hollenbeck was one of the three scholars that actually lifted the mummy of King Tut from its ornate resting place. It should be recalled that King Faisal was sponsored by the British and reigned beneficently over Syria at Damascus at the time. He had been with the army of the famous Colonel Lawrence, who led 4,000 Bedouins against the Turks during World War I. When later the French took over Syria, the British made Faisal king of Iraq, with capital at Baghdad. He was an Arab by descent, but a humane ruler by choice, and it was while he was in Switzerland, in an effort to bring about through the then League of Nations better conditions for the Assyrian Christians, that his career was cut short by death on September the 8th, 1933. King Faisal, it says, was a mystic. Dr. Hollenbeck had come to know much about the mystics of India. Through their knowledge of the science of mind and of the things we call occult, these men are liable to do things little short of miraculous. Dr. Hollenbeck was called to Baghdad to be the guest of the king, King Faisal, and in their conversation, the subject of mysticism arose. So, we're using several actual sources here, and I just came across these in very quick succession. So let's carry on with what it actually says here. So, in their conversation between Dr. Hollenbeck and King Faisal of Iraq. The king asked Dr. Hollenbeck if he had heard of the strange mystic in Assyria, adding, "I can assure you that this is not just another mystic. I believe that he is none other than God himself." Well, this man was Abdul Prince Baraba Baha. He claims descent from Abraham through Ishmael of the 33rd generation from Muhammad himself. He was born in Mecca. And apparently Rosita Horn of England wrote that he was the greatest soul that she had ever met. Of course, these antichrists are very good at reeling people in. Dr. Hollenbach was given a letter of introduction to Baha through King Faisal. Hollenbach visited Baha and had been told, of course, of the powers that this Baha possessed. Baha was said to have waved his hand in the presence of Hollenbeck, and a pile of logs caught fire and blazed ferociously. That's according to Dr. Hollenbeck himself. He was also said to have raised the dead. A man in a state of rigor mortis and early decay and had been dead for 4 days arose, apparently, when Baha told him to rise, calling him by his first name. So he was a necromancer of the first order by the sound of it. This mysterious Prince Abdul was found east of the Euphrates in the part of the divided kingdom of Alexander, from which the Antichrist is understood on the strength of Daniel 8:12 to come. This, together with the fast fulfilling outline of events foretold to the dates by the Abdul, is startling evidence, it says, of Satan's activity. In a printed sermon on the Antichrist, Dr. Louis T. Talbot states 10 attributes of the coming Evian of sin, and apparently Prince Abdul Baraba Baha has all of them. The only reference to Dr. Talbot actually takes us back to the same publication, so we do not see what the 10 attributes of the Antichrists, according to him, actually were. The fact that Baha was known so well at the time and by such people as King Faisal is a fascinating historical fact, and also that he was said to have been the director of the Serpent Race on Earth during his lifetime. That's according to this very obscure pamphlet, The Mystery of the Serpent by B.F. Jackson. And now we are going to look at that short manuscript, which was my original reference to Abdul Baha, written by a concerned ex-naval intelligence officer and researcher into the global mafia, our first author, yes, B.F. Jackson. This little-known pamphlet, written sometime after the early 1950s, is a most interesting document and known as The Mystery of the Serpent Race. Okay, so let's start with some quotes from that quite short book or pamphlet. The disposition of being improperly curious caused me to enlist in the United States Navy in 1919. The second ship in which I served was the battleship USS Wyoming, in which the chaplain was Father Brady. After getting accustomed to ship's routine, I began plying him with questions. First, I wanted to know all about the Catholic Church because I had been brought up as a Baptist and did not understand his Sunday services, the first portion of which was exclusively Catholic. He gave me an old dog-eared Catholic history book and turned me loose on my own. Next, I wanted to know about all biblical history, because I could not understand it. I also wanted to know what became of the 10 tribal house of Israel. The 10 tribes of Israel, the lost tribes. Well, this is how the book starts, and then it looks to the demonic world and its agents. He carries on. Jesus accused the Canaanite, Akkad, Idumean devils of not being capable of hearing his word. That word hear is akoo. It means understanding. They were and remain void of spiritual perception, which is the darkness in 2 Peter 2:4. And because they are totally cut off from God. Hebraic for the words again and take in 2 Kings 19:30 and Isaiah 37:31 are synonymous as yasaf it means to add. Root is shoresh, or root as a means of support. Downward is matar, or underneath. Bear is asar, to bring forth. Upward is lamala, high degree, as in being exalted. Then, insomuch as the place underneath is synonymous with under, in Job 26:5, that place is the lowest depth of the dimension of spirit. And he carries on in both passages. Isaiah is prophesying about a remnant of Judah escaping from Palestine. They were, in those days it says, 2 daughters of deposed King Zedekiah, Princess Tamar-Tefi and Scota, evacuated from Palestine in 584 BC. And also that the prophet Jeremiah brought them to the king of Zaragoza in Iberia, now Spain, and married Princess Scota to this king of Iberia. Well, Tefi, Queen of Ireland, daughter of Zedekiah, the last king of Judah, was born in Spain and died in Odba, in Meath, modern-day Meath, Leinster in Ireland. The chronicles say Tefi was born of the house of the High One, Princess of Zion, loved of the Lord, home of the house of her God, daughter of David, shepherd in Judah, tribe of the Lion, queen over Bethel and Dan, where they were scattered abroad. Tamar-Tefi and her sister Scota were the 2 daughters of King Zedekiah of the tribe of Judah, of course. Tamar-Tefi's descendants, it says here, if you wondered where I was going with this, are the royal bloodline of Ireland. Scota's descendants are the royal bloodline of Scotland. Those are the ones who would descend to the lowest depths of the dimension of spirit, then bring forth fruit that would be exalted. And this fruit, it says, are the Antichrist, or is the Antichrist. So, this is very fascinating with the stuff we've been looking at recently, with especially looking at the order of knowledge when we talked about how Christianity went through Ireland and what happened there later with the Mary cult. And also we can look to Scotland as being this centre, because out of it came the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, incorporating the Kabbalah, and of course the rest is history. And when we look at the history of the British Isles, which we've been talking about in the works of authors such as Comyns Beaumont, we see the importance of Scotland, the importance of the destruction of the original Scotland, the importance of the destruction of the real Ireland. And we can see that happening now. Ireland is falling. Scotland fell some time ago, but it is still a centre of power. So it carries on. Fabianism and communistic socialism, brought forth by the Scot-Irish infiltrators, who added it to the British government for a means of support after exalting it above government and of Christians. So basically what he's saying here is this world communistic socialistic system that we can see brought in through, of course, sustainable development and communitarianism, came in through the infiltration of these bloodlines, of these Scot-Irish infiltrators. So then we go to Britain. When the Christ was killed, the only members of the house of David in Palestine were Joseph of Arimathea and his family, Joseph, husband of Mary, the mother of Christ Jesus, and their kin. All others were in the British Isles. Those in Palestine, it says, did not murder Jesus Christ. Well, we know, of course, that Joseph of Arimathea had great influence and was known in that area of Britain where Christianity started, Somerset, and in particular Glastonbury. Of course, he was thought to have been a tin trader, very rich, and came into the Devon and Cornwall area and also Somerset. These are the stories that are still existing. The members of the house of David who pierced Jesus Christ are the Irish, Scot, English mongrel offspring of the British blooded aristocracy. Well, whether you believe this or not, it does kind of make sense historically, doesn't it? The house of David receiving grace and supplication in the day of the Lord is the immediate family of King George VI, which has withstood the tremendous pressure of the serpent and kept his line of David pure Israelite. Even Edward VIII married a serpent, Mrs. Simpson, Bernard M. Baruch's protege, in whom he hoped to put Satan on the throne of God. Well, this is really interesting because, of course, Baruch was a major player in the world revolutionary movement. Those mongrels are the children of Satan and are as guilty of the murder of Jesus Christ as the serpents in Jerusalem in 30 AD, when they asked that his blood be on them and their children. Therefore, they are totally cut off from God. When they look upon Christ Jesus in the day of the Lord, they will mourn with bitterness, yet it will profit them nothing, because they are of the devil. In Acts 1:11 are two of the archangels talking to the disciples of Christ after the latter passed back into the spiritual plane after his resurrection from death. Jesus passed back into the spiritual plane in the same body his disciples knew and loved. He walked and talked with, ate and drank with, and that which was pierced on the cross. Yet, at the moment of ascension, his powers of the cosmos changed the vibratory impulses of the spiritual energy of which his body was made, and the intensity of vibration changed him to tangible, visible spirit as he presented himself to James, Peter and John. The record therefore proves, when it became necessary for God's Christ, Son of Righteousness, and his archangels to come into the material plane in accordance with divine law, all that was necessary was merely to change the wavelength of the spiritual energy of which they are made, and the lowering of the vibratory impulses made them visible to human eyes without discomfort, and they were as tangible as any human. Now we've got to remember that this was written way before any of the recent New Age disruptors usurped these words such as wavelength and vibration and basically used them to mentor people into this New Age delusion, which is of course the opposite of what we're talking about here, in that what we're talking about is divine law. It carries on. They ate, they breathed, and they had all the prerogatives of man, and because they were in direct communication with the Eternal Father, they could step into the material plane and back into the spiritual plane with impunity. If it had been in accordance with God's plan for them to remain in the material plane and they had married human women, they could have fathered children as tangible and real as we. On the other hand, however, the devil was totally displaced from God, and when he transposed himself into the dimension of the material contrary to divine law, it was impossible for him to go back into the dimension of spirit because of God's spiritual energy. It was not the composition of the counterfeit substance going in to make the microcosmical order of his body or the state of being material. From that twice dead beast mongrelizing with human women sprang the people known as the Serpent Race, whose God for all ages has been the current devil, which is proven by Genesis 4, John 8:44 and Matthew 23:35, which proves they are responsible for all bloodshed in our Adamic Israelite household. So he's basically talking about the people who are the real inheritors of the earth. Yes, those who are referred to as the meek, who will inherit the earth. The serpent in Isaiah 14:29, it says, was the Luciferian priesthood and Satan. There is a belief that in Babylon from 721 to 330 BC, a relative of theirs exalted himself as God in India. In 600 BC, he was the king of the Nagar, or serpent, the serpent race in that land. Since time immemorial, the king of the serpent race has been the current eldest son of the original crown prince of hell. He was worshipped as Lucifer, yet they called him their god. The record of the one exalting himself as God in 600 BC is the first secular record of the exaltation in India, whereas his record in the Hindu scriptures goes back, it says here, to about 35,000 BC, when Enoch of the Adamic line of Seth says in his messianic prophecy, Satan first came out of the dimension of spirit, a counterfeit material beast making his appearance amidst man, contrary to divine law. So it follows that all the deception we see in the real versus the stated goals is part of this anti-divine program. In the Bible, the first serpent is Nashash. It is written with bars and dots under the last two characters. Written thus, it proves he is of Satan's serpent race of vampires. All this again from B. Jackson in his analysis of the serpent cult in The Mystery of the Serpent Race. So we next go to the Hindu demon goddess Kali, and this is really fascinating because it will explain why there is a resurrection of Kali worship in the West. First of all, let's have a quick break. Welcome back. I know I do play the soundtrack to the Heretics of London, the Smithfield Martyrs on pretty much every show, but there's a reason for it. They're very short, they're very ethereal, and they're a great little break from the heavy content of the shows, and they're very good for reflecting on, I think. I find them very good for reflecting and thinking. And also, I don't want to be hit with copyright claims from Spreaker, which sort of happened before, even though I was still using those songs and tunes from the soundtrack and those only. And they actually took me off their listings because of that. So if I play anything else, the whole thing could happen again. So that's one of the reasons I stick to those. And of course, they're very short. So let's get back to this. And we're going to go now to this kind of promotion of the demon goddess Kali in the West. So let's go back to what B.F. Jackson says in The Mystery of the Serpent Race. He says, yes, she will be a burning, fiery, stinging reptile. She is Kali, the prostituting, blood-drunk mother spirit of a race of religious cutthroats and murderers. And of course we have to remember that when we're talking about the serpent cult, as an aside, the Roman Catholic Church was an early adopter of the system and used it successfully until now, of course, where it is in the open in its support of the serpent cult, the head of the snake, and its current bankers, its lie of global sustainability through the UN Global Action Plan, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are the real and the stated goals all in one. So he carries on and says, Isaiah says its offspring would be a poisonous cockatrice. It was a female. During Isaiah's time, she was called Ishtar. Today she has adopted her original Hindu name of Kali. She is the deadness of the vampire and a representative of a counterfeit race. The destruction of the real Christianity has a true helper in Kali. This demoness, of course, has been introduced into the New Age system by Western charlatans and the self-defeating. It is seen on public profiles of those who exhibit their attention-seeking claptrap even on social media, or such as Facebook. No one who knows what Kali is would surely do this. Well, of course, they don't. They don't know, so that's why they do it. Of course, it is a demon who is appeased only by blood sacrifice, as she devours blood and has used the power of the demons which she has killed. The cover story is different, however, and says the dead demonic Kali wears 51 or 108 heads around her neck, and of course the arms, which are meant to really be something else. The real and the cover story goes on with the Kali story, of course, and these conflicting stories are not really agreed upon, they're just conflicting stories. Well, this is always about transcending, according to the New Age cult. Ma Kali is this mother aspect. The capturing of this female demon as a mother image is part of its story in Hinduism. The stories are complex and entertaining, which it seems is their purpose, really, their superficial purpose anyway, to capture the imagination of the gullible and those with fleeting memories and attention spans. In reality, this creature demands blood sacrifice and is given it in rituals all over India and Nepal. The satanic dead vampire is manifest. Its reality comes through the blood and into the minds of those participating in a sacrificial cult. It is present in Kali, the poisonous female of the beast system. In Isaiah 14:29 is a prophecy for this era. The serpent is Nakash, and written with the bars and dots to prove he is of Satan's serpent. Now, what we're talking about here is how this was written, I think, before the King James Bible. So this is very important when we're looking at the original translations which go into ancient Greek, Aramaic and Hebrew. So this promotion of Kali to the European races by delusional New Agers is meaningful through its symbolic capture of their souls. That this should be propagated to those who now inhabit the home of the original Christianity in the British Isles is no coincidence. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. In one of our recent shows, we pointed out that one, if not the original Christian church from approximately, so they say, 36 AD in Somerset is around the area now known as Glastonbury, a place which is now, of course, been brought into ridicule through its New Age drug addicts and delusionists and Kali worshippers. It could not be further away from the original church, which, of course, is the entire point. It all makes sense with the destruction of what was there originally. The New Age delusion has moved in, and the low-level black magic covers up what was there in the first place. It's just an infiltration program, nothing more. Well, there has been much talk, of course, of a reptilian race. The distraction stories say that they are from another planet and another constellation. These are modern showmen who have been fed stories which they have repeated. These stories are published and circulated, well, because they are a cover story, nothing more. These stories were exaggerated to the point of being ridiculous, which was the entire point of them. They were fed to those who could construct a distracting nonsense, which could easily be ridiculed, of course, and which was, of course, ridiculed and still is, ridiculed by those who supplied it, as they know the truth of the matter and have done very well to conceal the true origin of this story. If one looks at reality and how their system on Earth works, there is nothing to suggest they travelled here either interdimensionally or on spaceships, as the New Agers say. They have been here a long time. Of course, the Nephilim were fallen angels and are said to have left the hierarchy of demons on the planet. The demons are certainly here, and they are here in their multitudes. And they are affecting a very large proportion of everybody on planet Earth to a greater or lesser extent. The reptilian race is, of course, said to be thousands of years old. They are certainly part of these demons, or at least controlled by demonic forces. Well, this story, presented in the TV miniseries of the 80s, V, was later taken up by New Age performers such as David Icke, who was fed further nonsense by a woman calling herself Arizona Wilder, who actually disappeared. And she has done a few talks at different conferences, but her main claim to fame was being a priestess for these black magic circles around Europe. Then it kind of changed to be tailored to what Icke wanted to put out. She originally talked of these entities being demons that had to be controlled and sent back, and they were being channeled through her. This is what she said. But she changed her story for Icke, saying that these reptilians came from Mars. So that's quite interesting. But in V, the mini TV series, which they actually remade a few years ago, this story is taken up by these New Age performers, and basically they are wearing human masks in the TV series, which can be ripped off to reveal their reptilian eyes and scaly skin. And this is the archetypal reptilian that we know and have seen many times. This is the media representation that we've been given. The reptilian race are very good at rewarding those who repeat good cover stories. They get fame and fortune and massive exposure. Well, we see the serpent race is in most cultures. Their dragons and snake symbology is used by so-called bloodline families. The caduceus is but one aspect, and recently in South America there has been a huge archive of these things found in the land, on walls, and they are tens of meters long. I was going to cover them in this show, but I don't want to get distracted from it. We'll put it into a future show because it's a very interesting find. But it adds on to the already massive amount of reptilian creatures that we see representing kingdom and bloodlines. So the reptilian race are present in the 3rd chapter of Genesis in the Bible, according to our first author, in the mystery of the serpent race. They're also present in the Hindi scriptures, and he is called Shesha, which is pronounced Shaitan or Satan. He is symbolized as being a 12-headed cobra. The plans of the serpent race have been spread through occult Freemasonry. Those indulging in black magic and Kabbalah are working with this serpent ideology. It is doomed in the long run, so those practicing it are not holding back. Again, this pamphlet states that the serpent race king at the time of writing was this Asiatic Turco-Mongol prince Abdul Baraba Baha. To bring this forward as far as false prophets go, of course there are now hundreds if not thousands of cults. In fact, from the 80s, it took off more than it ever did at the time of Alice Bailey and Madame Blavatsky and their channeled entities. And of course, the channeled entity was also known as the Tibetan, and channeled by these two, it could easily have been the misleading voice referred to in The Serpent Race by B.F. Jackson, when describing that the origin of the occult was up until recently in Lhasa in Tibet. Well, the current Dalai Lama is certainly a very willing participant in the Head of the Snake UN Global Control Plan. There are thousands of fake gurus and millions of dupes following them. The fact that they are fake and have no type of power, especially spiritual, is masked, of course, by their lying tongues and exhibitionism which nowadays passes for charisma. The globalist pawns such as Sadhguru, and indeed anyone calling themselves guru, is aligned with the UN goals as well as their materialistic manipulation. These are all serpent race agents. They bring in this fake Hinduism for Westerners. When I say fake, because it is not Hinduism, it is Hinduism for Westerners, or aspects of the serpent cult for Westerners. Of course, these people are sex and power addicted, and it keeps them hopelessly enslaved, but not as enslaved as the willing dupes who follow them. For simplicity's sake, the head of the snake globally can be seen as the UN and, of course, its agencies. Anyone who cannot see this has been deluded. It is more than obvious and all written down. Again, we have to look at what the serpent does. It deceives us. It gives us something which sounds good. So we go along with it. It's for our good and the good of everyone else. It's for the common good. But the real story is something entirely different. It is the language of deception and manipulation we see in the UN documents and its agencies' websites. It is then in policy through a global network of NGOs run by dupes and headed by those who know the real goals. We covered much of this in the past, so we'll not go on about it here. Check out New Age Global Governance, or put New Age or Communitarianism into windowsontheworld.net and see what comes up. We're talking about a race of material vampires. It is a counterfeit race of devils not created by God. This is according to the mystery of the serpent race. He says it is on display as such in Job 26:5, Psalm 88:10, and Isaiah 14:9 and 26:9, in which the original Hebraic for the word dead is Rephaim, which means the shades of spiritual and material death. And of course, the Rephaim were meant to have ruled Palestine for 1,000 years. Of course, we have to look at where Palestine was. Are we talking here about the modern day Scotland? That's not too far-fetched if you've been following our shows, by the way. But it's a deep dive, and let's stay on track for tonight with what we're saying here. Well, we have to conclude that this is all about the battle between those who have sentience and real ability and those who are spiritually dead. And those who are spiritually dead have no creative ability. And that is the key to unlocking the whole of this plan. And one that we've been talking about, of course, for many years. So we have to remember what it is to be alive, to be aware in every moment, not distracted or in need of any form of gratification or distraction. To be aware of the unified field behind everything, not caught up in the manufactured or occult mind traps which have been given to us. They are born spiritually dead from the womb. That is the serpent race. This means they have no innate divinity revealed as higher intelligence. There is no higher intelligence which manipulates and lies to get what it wants and destroys everything, of course, including itself in the end. This is not intelligence, as intelligence is self-renewing, self-supporting and creative, and also interacts in an intelligent manner. And that is the opposite of what we see in their language and in their technocracy. In other words, intelligence works harmoniously with its surroundings. Anyone who has had the insight to see they are being manipulated can, of course, understand this. So, God put in man a certain genealogical power to cause the marrow of the bones to generate blood for the life of the flesh. That's in Levites 17:11. The serpent race lacks that power. He steals it from man. These are energy vampires. And everybody experiences this on a daily basis, because most things are there to distract or drain your energy unless you have full control over your own intelligence and divinity. So, the author goes on. I made an investigation and discovered the Serpent Race was dominating the field of religion through the Federal Council of Churches of Christ and the National Conference of Christians and Jews. Clergymen by the thousands were spewing forth modernism, tolerance for anti-Christian methods, mongrelization and internationalism instead of Christ. I found political corruption had extended its slimy tentacles from the White House to the small villages and into farms so as to deliberately destroy all moral and spiritual values. I was appalled at the discovery of sex degenerates employed in our national capital. I found treason excused, betrayal of our nation condoned by the President and his administration, the armed forces sabotaged, our natural resources deliberately wasted, and onerous unconstitutional taxes consuming the fruit of all endeavour and labour. I found the immigrant minorities being made sullen, rebellious and in a state of turmoil, the indigenous majority perplexed and confused, neither one proud of its race or heritage, and the barriers let down for the destruction of all. Well, this could be today, couldn't it? This was written probably well before the early 1950s. There is no date on the pamphlet. He says, everywhere I turned, I met defeat. My own kin laughed me to scorn. Do not be carried away with your enthusiasm, they say. Cultivate the team spirit. Forget politics. It is only the game of crooks. Well, this is what we're being told at the moment, isn't it? This is what the whole of the opposition is being led into. By the opposition, I mean those who may actually be able to turn it around. Yes. To hell with Christianity, they say. It is only for feeble-minded people. Relax, enjoy yourself. Has not the world turmoil come out all right in the past? A serpent race? You're crazy, they said. My whole being revolted against such a satanic system in which church dogma and doctrine, national and state legislation and legislature encourages Christian apostasy. Indifference to un-American and unconstitutional activities to such an extent that the basic and fundamental structure of our personal and national life is in jeopardy. So he carries on February the 5th, 1949, and invited an exclusive audience in the Shriners Auditorium, Los Angeles, California, were told that the protocols of world revolution were authentically the blueprint of world conquest. Yet they declared that it would all be accomplished before the end of 1953, so they are somewhat behind. But remember, this is a relentless plan which never stops. While you're sleeping, it is in motion. It is now 2024, and they have nearly achieved their goal with the global lies around fake enviro cults and mental degeneration through technology, which is merely a part of their control system. The fact that a clever person can find their way around this system means that there needs to be a collective army to enforce the right opinions and destroy those which identify any solutions, which of course is what happens all the time and what these shows have been warning about since we started, yet nobody else seems to talk about it, or very few. And of course the very few who do say anything about this are marginalised, and you don't hear about them. That's why we have to look very hard to find good information now. This is what they are calling their global community. When the truth behind an action is revealed, its agents always use the same tactics. These basic demonic principles of gaslighting, lying and abuse are all they ever use. They are completely and utterly uncreative because they are anti-divine. It's the same tactics used by all demons. Deny, degrade, disrupt and deceive, which is actually the motto, a phrase used by the British intelligence services, which are based entirely upon satanic principles. So the infiltration is now near complete. The end, as they say, is in sight. Well, it's important to be on the right side and take the right fork in the road. Wrong decisions will only mean those taking them will be drawn down the same hole as those implementing them. In the end, even the demonic realms and the devil need your consent, which means, of course, the choice is yours. Well, I hope you got something out of that. We covered several different aspects and brought them together, but it all makes sense in the bigger picture of what is happening at the moment. And it's all about information which will help in defeating what we are these days up against. So thanks to all those who support the show. Please continue to do so, and do check our Odyssey channel and the website. We have a massive archive there, and if you want to support us, join the £5 a month club. Then all that you have to do is send me an email, info@windowsontheworld.net. You can also support us on the homepage through PayPal and Patreon. I have to say that these days because we are being very marginalised, and it's very difficult now to pay for the platforms and all the stuff we have to pay for. So I'm still going to carry on doing it. I've got loads of films I want to make too, and we'll be talking about all that in the next few shows.